morning, everyone. We'll start over again. I'll be behind the mic. Maybe you can hear me. The North Alabama Christian Children's Home has been in operation for 48 years. Brother Don Williams has been the director now for 14 years. We have been helping them and associated with them for, I forget how many years, but many years. It's a wonderful work. We are just thankful to be part of this work and for the good things they do. It's affected so many young people's lives and older people. But we're so thankful to have Don with us this morning. He will be teaching the class in here as well as the sermon this morning. And Marshall will introduce Don a little more formally for the AM worship service. So if you would bow with me in a word of prayer. Most holy and righteous Heavenly Father, we thank you for being our God. We thank you for blessing us with such a beautiful morning. We thank you with blessing us for this time together, for all those that's present, especially this morning as we center our thoughts around you and glorifying your name. We also want to thank you for Don Williams and what he has done over the years and for the good work up at the North Alabama Christian Children's Home. We ask your continued blessing on them, not only now but in the future. We know that you have blessed them and will continue to bless them. Lord, forgive us where we are amiss. We thank you in the name of Christ. Amen.
Good morning, and it's always a joy to come back and be with the good folks here at this place, and so we thank you so much for the opportunity of coming. And with the help of our tech guy, we're going to get this PowerPoint going here in just a minute, and there you go. Charles Dickens perhaps said it best concerning what we've all been going through in the last 20 months or so. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. Those words perhaps describe what you've had to go through and also what we have gone through as well. But my hope would be that the statement that John made concerning his friend Gaius could be true as you, for you as well. That I hope that you are as strong physically as already, hopefully, you are spiritually. You know, looking back at the last year and a half, it's interesting to see lessons that perhaps you never thought would come about that you were able to be a part of. And certainly it's because of the providence of God. Somebody has described providence as the hand of God in the glove of history. You go back, you look back after a period of time and you say, that's why that worked out like it did. And certainly I believe with the children's home that has been the case. The words of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, I believe, enter into what we're discussing today. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, and sadly, a time to refrain from embracing. That certainly applies, does it not? A time to gain and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to throw away. In the last 20 months, not only in Alabama, but throughout our nation, there has been a lot of change that's taken place. In some cases, there's been an increase in births because families have been together more. Sadly, there's been a time in which folks have to deal with death. Just this afternoon, there is a funeral taking place in Tuscaloosa, Northport area of a good friend of mine who was a fireman, a preacher of the gospel, and sadly, after about 2.5 months in the hospital, passed away. due to COVID. And I'm sure you have had to deal with that in your families as well as the church family also. In regards to the events that we had, and this is not moving for some reason, sir. Okay, there we go. When this picture was taken, it was in February of 2020. COVID wasn't even anything that existed. And when we began our annual trail ride and auction, which is our biggest fundraiser, we had no thoughts concerning the idea of needing to distance ourselves or things of that nature. When we had this event on March the 6th of 2020, there was a little discussion of COVID up in the state of Massachusetts, but besides that, it was not even anything that happened. And yet, as you may recall, it's 2 weeks later when the state and also the nation shut down and churches were not able to meet on a regular basis. A time to plan, I thought that was interesting because that was one of the things that we had to sell, a John Deere tractor and then a building that could go with it. And even in the midst of people being a little concerned about this COVID thing, even though it really had not hit that big as much, we were able to make $50,468, which was the most ever at that particular time. Our children learned to plant some things, and so there's some sunflowers that they did along with some other things because they had a lot of time on their hands. And this is an event that happens every year. It's going to be April the 9th, Lord willing, next year. But it was a great, great event. We had a lot of good folks. We had sojourners that came, and there are some in that group there that helped us unload all the things. Even some sewing took place of one of the big tents, as we just read about there in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. But it's always a lot of fun. Normally we've had as many as 800 people that come to this event from all over, 3 different states even. But we had about 650 or so, about 65 horse riders that rode his trails. All kinds of things that we had to sell and such like. You've heard the old statement, what is your junk is somebody else's treasure. And so we sold $6,000 of junk or treasure just in one of those tents. On this particular occasion, it was outside. Mike Davidson, his father attended Eastern Meadows, is one of our main cooks. And so there they are getting ready for the chicken stew that we have. And those ladies there are deboning it and getting it ready. Of course, with chicken stew, you also have to have a lot of potatoes. And so you can see folks there working on the potatoes and getting things ready. And those guys over in the right corner are acting like they've lost a finger. Actually, they're not. But what you see here is this is the potato smasher right there. And so this is about as country as you can get. But it's a lot of fun. And there's a lot of potatoes that have to go into the chicken stew. 130 gallons of chicken stew. And so that's what you see there. That's the barn, the Amish barn that we sell all kinds of things with. Brand new swings, brand new refrigerator, all kinds of furniture. There was the folks, it was a beautiful day, and so we ate outside as much as we could. And there's some of the good things and folks who are helping us move things from one to the other. We have auctioneers that help us a great deal, and it's a lot of fun. There's also, as we read about in Ecclesiastes 3, a time to build up. This is the oldest home on campus. This is the Kent home. We have 3 homes on campus, and this was the oldest one that built in 1980, and we needed to add on to it. And so you see there the carport because that's the part that we're going to add on to. We take that out. We add 1,000 square feet to it. And so even in the midst of COVID, I believe it started it started in July or August of 2020 and then went through some of that COVID time. Took about a year altogether to do. But you can see them taking that down. We had 6 churches and also Walmart and Sam's that gave us grants to be able to help provide $75,000 toward this renovation. And then you see them adding on that additional part. And eventually, there you go, you see the finished product. Everything to the left of that is brand new all the way straight back. And that's basically the house parents' quarters. This is the Kent home. Right now, we still don't have house parents for it. If you know somebody would be interested, we'd love to have them come and talk to us about it. But it's very, very nice. It has its own handicap shower and bathroom area. Good, very nice washroom. Somebody donated the flooring, and that was really, really helpful to us. We opened all that up beforehand. It had been sort of cut up, but we opened it up, and so it's very, very nice now. And you can see pictures of that as well as our bedrooms. It can hold up to 8 girls. Those are some men who came one day right before the state came and just sort of tidied everything up and fixed a few things. The fellow there on the right, their folks there donated their labor. That we just paid for the materials, and they put everything in the cabinets and did a great, great job with it. We had a lot of people help us with this, and it means a great deal. We also have a handicapped bathroom for children as well. And so that's the Kent home. During the pandemic, we, like probably yourselves, school was out, and so everything was having to be done virtually. Our children were on campus. We basically had to close up the campus in regards to not allowing outsiders to come in because of the fear of COVID. The wearing of masks was mandatory. Even worship services for several months were online because churches were not allowed to meet, as the case may be. And yet, at the same time, we wanted to be sure that our children not only think about themselves, because we were going to keep them safe, but we wanted them to think outside the box. We wanted them to think about others as well. You know, that's a biblical idea of thinking about the needs of others. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem, look to others better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. The Bible certainly gives us the need to think about the struggles that others have. And during the pandemic, a lot of that came out that we weren't even aware of. Galatians 6:2 talks about bearing one another's burdens. And by doing that, fulfilling the law of Christ. Doing what our Lord did on a regular basis. Sometimes take the time to study that phrase, move with compassion. Because our Lord would often be described in that manner, and He would see the needs of others, and He would take care of those needs. And then He would also take care of them spiritually as well as physically. Matthew chapter 25, you've got that wonderful statement of those that hear the words, come, blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. And then He describes why. Because I was hungry, you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you came unto me. I was in prison, and you visited me. So what I offered to our children was, let's do some things for others. And one of the things that we thought about were the nurses that were at the new hospital, and those that were, in some cases, locked in. Some cases, they didn't, because their lack of staff, they had to stay there. They were spending the night there. And we said, why don't we do some things for them? And so some of our house moms made some cookies, and we went to Sam's and bought potato salad. And meanwhile, we had a lot of chicken, and I'll be talking about that here in just a moment, that had been given to us. And so we had that cooked. And then these wonderful signs, our social worker here is holding up one of them. And we wanted them to know that we were thinking about them. And so it was a good day whenever I was able to go to that new hospital, the emergency room. They met me outside, and there's the food that and the signs, and they really, really appreciated that. And it was something good for our children to be able to know that they were giving back, and that as so many people like yourselves that help us, they were being helped as well in this manner. Also, our children, especially our girls, were able to be a part of an 80th birthday drive-in for one of the elders. And so you could drive by and express your love and appreciation for them. They also made banana pudding and cookies for some of the older people in church. And so that was very, very helpful. I mentioned the chicken, and I mentioned Providence. It was back in March of 2020 that Brent Hester, he and his wife here you see, had gotten some, he is a meat broker in the Madison, Huntsville area. And so he's become a friend of the home for the last several years, and when we have our chicken for the chicken stew, he's gotten it for us, 200-300 pounds. Well, the week that we were about to have our trail ride, Brother Terry, he came up to me and he said, now, Tyson Foods wants to give the children's home some chicken. And I said, well, that's really, appreciate that. And I said, how much? He said, well, it may be a lot. And I thought, 3 or 4 cases or something, that'd be fine. So on the Friday before we had that event on Saturday, he said, I just got a word saying that they have 28,000 pounds of chicken waiting for you. And I'm thinking, where are we going to put, what are we going to do with 28,000 pounds? Well, again, God's providence. Brent said, I have a friend who is the manager of the local Rudy Farms Gemstone food locker here in Florence. He's agreed to have it for you, to keep it for you. And so sure enough, right after that, the next week, here came 28,000 pounds of chicken. And it's never. So some of you perhaps have been in one of those minus 10-degree lockers. I'd never been in one, but that was interesting. Needless to say, you had to wear special clothes and whatever. You couldn't stay in there too long, but it was going to stay frozen for a long, long time. Well, for the next 2 months, we would give out that chicken to churches and to nonprofit agencies, to children's homes, and whatever. And on the day that we were giving out the very last amount, Brent said, hey, I have a buddy up down in Dothan, Alabama. He's got 40,000 pounds of chicken waiting on you. And I thought, first of all, we don't have the money to do something like that, to pay for that. And secondly, where are we going to put 40,000 pounds? And again, the providence of God. Within 2 hours, Mr. Robert Walker of Service One Transport, who was a friend of the children's home, was the one that had given that John Deere tractor that you saw earlier in the pictures. He said, I know who you are, talking about the home. I know what you're trying to do, giving out this chicken. I would be more than glad to go down and get it and it not cost you a dime. Somebody has told me that a trip like that would cost easily $10,000. He didn't do it once. He didn't do it twice. He did it the third time. And then sadly, after his death due to COVID, his family came to me and said, we want to continue to do this in our dad's honor and his dad's memory. He would be so upset if we did not say yes to this. And so they have done it the 4th time already. That's $40,000 that they did. And sadly, in November of last year, he passed away with COVID. Wonderful, wonderful man. And so it come in on a big truck, and once the 40,000 pounds began to come, we gave it away in 1 day's time. And so we would work it out where we would have agencies, churches, ended up from 4 different states, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Mississippi, that would come at different times and get it, as well as nonprofit agencies. There it is on the Coliseum parking lot where we have all kinds of people. You see the buses there, the vans. We see people just working it. We use tractors to sort of move it to make it a lot better. And it just really worked out amazingly well. One time we got 10,000 chicken nuggets like the Panda Express people have. And that went in a short period of time. On August 11th, we gave away 5,000 pounds to 16 agencies and churches. And then on October 13th, gave away 27,000 pounds with folks from 4 states. And our last time was January of this year, where we had some. Interestingly enough, Friday I got a text from him saying, can you go to Columbus, Georgia? He said, do you reckon we can get a truck to go to Columbus, Georgia? And I said, well, I think we can. He said, well, I've got 2 leads for some chicken there. And so hopefully we're going to be able to do that. But it's been a great blessing. And who would have ever thought? That was when we were doing it in the parking lot before, when it was a small amount. And you can see the different guys. The signs that they're holding up are the different kinds of chicken. I believe at one time I counted 13 different kinds of chicken that had been given to us. And this was all frozen. Those are some of the good guys that helped us. Some of those are guys from the children's home. They helped us in a great deal. The fellow over in the second picture in the black is our sheriff, Rick Singleton. And so every time that we have done this, they have provided police support just to make sure that somebody doesn't come up and cause issues, because it's not like we're just handing it out. We've already got it distributed. We already know how much you're to get based on what you're going to use it for. And so it wasn't just come up because we couldn't do it that way. We had all kinds of different folks help us in so many different ways. Child Haven Children's Home is pictured in that. Natural disaster off to the left. Some of you may know Stinson Carpenter and his good wife from Rainbow Omega over there on the right. They've come 3 different times. So we've had a lot of good help from so many different people who were a part of it. We've had some that were young and then not so young. Interestingly enough, the one over there on the right, they're from Hartsville, Alabama. They were feeding 600 families a week. And so that's the most of anybody. And I believe on that occasion, that was about 340 or 50 cases of chicken that they were immediately going to take back and distribute in one day's time. It's interesting what you can do with the tractor and the log chain. And so they figured out the idea. If you look real close on the one on the right, they started pulling out those pallets with log chains. And so we had to be really careful about that. But that helped facilitate a lot of folks helping out in so many different ways. Altogether, we were able, during the process of time, to help 2 Christian universities, 60 congregations from 3 different states, 2 nursing homes, 12 children's homes from 4 different states, and about 60 nonprofit agencies. The hungry were fed. People who were hurting at least had some food to take care of the needs of their family. But God works in mysterious ways. Among preachers, there's always the adage, eat the bird and preach the word. And it's interesting how God used this situation. Over in Mark chapter 6, the Bible says that Jesus saw a multitude coming to him. And it says that he was moved with compassion because they were looked like sheep without a shepherd. And so if you'll notice in the story, he preached the gospel to them, but then he created the miracle of being able to feed all those folks and taking care of their needs and having leftovers. Well, in this situation, the reverse happened. These churches saw the need to set up situations in their community to be able to feed them. And so they would announce, hey, you can come from 2 to 4 and we're giving out all these bags of chicken and it's completely free. At the same time, they would try to follow up on that and be able to try to study with some of those folks. And so in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, that's exactly what happened. Among the Hispanic people, they fed them physically, and then they began to set up Bible studies with them. And we're glad to report that Debbie and Ricardo are now New Testament Christians because, first of all, they were fed physically with this chicken, and then they were able to study and be baptized into Christ. In Double Springs, Alabama, there was a man by the name of Jim Moody, a widower in his 70s, I believe it was. And that church began the idea that on every Wednesday they were going to take plates of this chicken and other food that went along with it to anybody in the community, to shut-ins in the church, but also people in the community. Well, somebody knew Mr. Jim. And somebody said, well, why don't we call and see if he's interested? Well, sure enough that he was, and he was so appreciative that they would bring him this plate. And so every Wednesday they would be able to do this. As the preacher Vance Hutton says, it helped us have a purpose to get together for. Even though we practiced social distancing and perhaps wore our mask, we were able to have something in those sad times to be able to come together for. Well, the end result was that they were able to study with Jim Moody. And he was about to undergo back surgery, but shortly after his back surgery, he obeyed the gospel. And it was so interesting that Vance, the preacher, was telling me that once Brother Jim came up out of the water, he says, I feel better already, even though he had just had back surgery. Sometimes the people that you meet touch your heart. There was a group that came for us to get chicken several times called Hearts for the Homeless. And the fellow who heads it up is a fire chaplain like myself. And he was telling me, he said, about a mile from where we are right here in this parking lot of the Coliseum, there is a Vietnam veteran, and said his house is literally falling in. And we found out about him, and we went to him, and he said, why didn't you ask somebody to help you? Your house is falling in. You have very little. You have no family really to take care of you. And he says, when I came back from Vietnam, they spit in my face. And some of us even had to take our uniforms off so that we would not get hurt. We made sure that he got chicken, and now they are building a new home for him. And so we were grateful that that could be the case. In Dyersburg, Tennessee, Chuck Morris, who used to be a teacher at Freed-Hardeman, came on 3 different occasions. The last time he came was, I believe, in November, and he got 100 cases of 20-pound chicken chubs. They were in 10-pound bags. And what he did was he let the folks know ahead of time by text that he was going to be in the church parking lot at this time with this trailer completely loaded. In fact, they didn't even think they were going to get it finished. I mean, they just had to get it in there so much. And it was a small trailer, but 2,000 pounds. But he gave away 200 bags of chicken in 1 hour. Meanwhile, the ladies, God bless ladies who help out in so many different ways, they were taking chicken that already had been given to them the time before and putting them in what is referred to as a tilt skillet. I've never heard of such. But it was some type of big thing that you put the chicken in, and literally it would take the chicken off the bone. And while they were doing that, then they would scoop it up with nets of some kind, and then the ladies brought their mixers and began to grind up the chicken. Meanwhile, there were other ladies there at the church that were making pones of cornbread. Altogether, they made 130 9x13 pans of chicken and dressing. On Sunday, right after church services, they asked everybody to take one to someone who was in need, and they called it the dressing blessing. And so we were grateful that we could hear about good things like that took place out of something we didn't even know was going to exist in regards to coming our way during all this. We had to think outside the box for our drive-through takeout. Normally we have this at the Coliseum, but people could not get together. In fact, at that time, they weren't even allowing people to come together. And so we did this at the home, and some of our children helped us with that. And so in about 30 minutes time, people could come to our campus. You see people lined up there. They'd tell us about they wanted either barbecue or chicken, and then they would leave some money. This was perhaps one of the first drive-by opportunities that was there in Lauderdale County, because this was in June of last year. And so the end result was we got the most money ever, $54,128, about 600 plates. Some who were impoverished came and got food, perhaps even free, and that was wonderful. But a lot of people helped out in so many different ways. And so we were grateful for that. Lord willing, next year we're going to move this event from March to April. It's going to be April the 9th. We'd love for you to come and be with us. If you have horses, you can come ride his trails that morning and then be a part of the big auction itself. A lot of goat stew. If you haven't tried goat stew, you need to. It's really good. And then the chicken stew as well. 200 pounds of barbecue, ham and beans, hamburgers and hot dogs. And we just have a lot of fun. This past year, we had, again, a drive-through takeout that used to be at the Coliseum here on the left. Those are all the names of the people who had called in ahead of time, so we knew what they were doing. And so we were able to make about 600 plates and $33,000. It was done there under our pavilion. This little boy up here on the right is literally standing on a ladder to be able to scoop out the beans. And so I thought that was pretty neat of him, 9-year-old boy helping us out. And then in the back, the fellow in the white pants is in his 80s. And so we had folks from both spectrums helping us out. We had our motorcycle ride to the home. It was this past August. We had it outside. We used social distancing, and I had a lot of fun with it, and raised the most money ever before. There again is some of it. This is Columbus Coker. He's 94 years young. He was the one that helped start the children's home. And so he comes in on what I call the Barney sidecar. And so you see him there riding in with the help of his nephew. And we're grateful for all that he does. We always appreciate people praying for us. It's good to see Brother Charles Body. I remember many gospel meetings that he held at Northport, and we were talking about Dad. And thankfully, Dad was able to be a part of some of this. He came on 2 different occasions. That's my twin brother Ron on the left there, and myself. And Dad would hold the list of all the people coming in. And so Amory, Mississippi, where they live now, was able to be a part of this several times. And we're grateful that he was able to be a part of it. He can afford, if he continues to do well, he'll be 92 December 20th. And preached for some 67 years, and continues to do as well as he can. That's our family that I appreciate you praying for as well. The ones on the right live in Kentucky. Miss Kinsley here is 14 today, so I got to sing happy birthday to her this morning on their way to church. And then our younger son and his family live in Huntsville, Alabama, where he's a deacon at Meridianville. Those are some of the children of the home. Altogether, we've probably had some 600 children. COVID has sort of changed a little of that, and that it was just really hard. There were some homes that had a lot more problems with COVID than we did. For the first 19 months, we only had 2 children who had ever had COVID. One was the oldest, and he did really, really well, and then another one. About 3 weeks ago, 3 girls in one room got COVID, and so still altogether 5, but in some cases, some homes almost completely shut down because of COVID and moving kids about. And so in order for us to take a child from another place, we had to have them tested. We had to make sure that they weren't bringing something in, because we knew that our children were okay because of what they were doing. But we weren't concerned, so that's why some of the numbers were down. Presently, we have 10. We just had 3 to leave, but we have 10 children in 2 homes, and we will be taking more in soon. In fact, yesterday there was a birthday celebration for one of our girls that turned 16, and all her family was trying to come in. We're grateful to say that over the last 13 years, some 38 of our children have become New Testament Christians. One of our young men that used to be with us is now seeking law enforcement and doing some preaching also. And so we're grateful for that. In Alabama, you are considered an orphan if you've lost only one parent to death. Sometimes people will ask the question, well, how many orphans do you have? Well, biblically speaking, when you think about that statement in James 1 verse 27, to help the fatherless and widows in their affliction, that word, according to Brother Guy in Woods, means those that are bereft or robbed of parents, whether it's by death or desertion or divorce. In that case, every one of our children, the 600 who have been there from the state of Alabama, are orphans in a biblical sense, because either they have had parents that have died, or robbed because parents weren't doing what they needed to do. Sadly, we're seeing more and more neglect. We're seeing more and more abandonment. We're seeing more and more abuse. The sad fact is that 70% of children in foster care have been abused in one way or another. That could be physical, that could be mental, that could be emotional, that could be sexual, or all of the above. And yet the fact of the matter is that these are children that deserve a place where they can be treated normal, a safe haven away from the chaos that they have been a part of. I remember on one occasion, a young lady who had been with us for several years, and she said to her house mom, "I don't understand it." She said, "What do you mean?" She said, "It's so quiet in here. I live in a world of chaos. We hollered, yelled. The louder you yelled, maybe you got what you wanted. I don't understand that this home isn't that way." Well, that's the way every home should be, right? To be able to be as normal and to be known that you're loved, that you're cared for. And we hope that they get the point, that they learn from that. Several months ago, we had 3 new children that are now still with us come in, and I like to, if I can, meet them whenever they come in, especially outside if possible. But I could tell that they were a little scared, they were a little concerned. They were coming from a whole different environment to a place that they'd never been before. We're out in the country, you've got donkeys braying about 150 yards away. You've got dogs, you've got deer that run through. It's out in the country. And so they were a little concerned, but after a while, one of the girls started showing them the bicycles that we have on campus and the loop that's right there on our campus, concrete, where they could ride their bicycles. And they began to ride their bicycles, and Amelia was riding with them, and she was talking to the girls and getting to know them and whatever, and just making them feel better. You could just see that they were beginning to relax and be able to enjoy things a little bit more. And I called Amelia over to me, and I said, "Amelia, thank you so much for showing them, about the home and to help make them feel comfortable." And she said, "Mr. Don, that's what I'm here for." And I thought, wow, maybe we're making a difference. Maybe we're making a difference. One of our young men will be shortly leaving us. In Alabama, you age out at 21. The state requires that you go on your own. And so Nehemiah has been with us for 5 years, now the longest one on campus. He just finished his welding degree. He is now working at a welding shop. He's got a truck. And this past Monday, I met with the Atlas Church of Christ there in the Killen area. And they were wanting to get more involved. And I said to them, Nemo, that's his nickname, big fella, played football really good and whatever. I said, Nemo's going to be leaving us. I said, what if y'all were willing to sort of help think about some things he's going to need in his apartment and get those things for him? They don't have to be new. It could be used, furniture or whatever, clean set of dishes and whatever. Well, they've taken and run with that. And so, Lord willing, 2 weeks from today, 2:30, they're having a pounding for him. Now, I had to explain to him what a pounding was. I said, well, it's sort of like a shower, but it's not the wedding part. because, pounding is an old word that some people don't understand. And so that's what they're doing. I got a text yesterday from somebody saying, I've got a recliner for them. Somebody else has a couch. There's all kinds of things. And so we are getting things ready for Nehemiah. Lord willing, again, he worked. COVID is, if you've been looking for an apartment, they're hard to find because people aren't moving because of COVID. And so thankfully we were able to call up somebody who I go to church with there at Florence Boulevard, and they had one apartment. And so late Friday afternoon, we got the word that everything looks good for him to get it. So if everything works out on November the 10th, he'll be leaving us, but he'll be leaving us with all these things and all the blessings that people will be able to give in that regard. In Memphis, Tennessee, there was a fellow by the name of Jeremy who came down at least once, maybe twice, to get some of this chicken that we've been talking about. And later on, he called me back and he said, I was handing out chicken in my neighborhood, and I was talking to some of our people, and I went to these folks and I said, we have this free chicken that we'd like for you to have. And she said, well, where did it come from? He said, well, it came from a children's home in Florence, Alabama, and Tyson Foods. And the person said, why would a children's home in Tyson Foods want to give me some chicken? And the answer that he gave him was, that's what Christians do. In Matthew 5, verse 16, he says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. We thank you so much for your continued care and support. For those who are online, if you want to learn more about us, you can write us at NACCH, North Alabama Christian Children's Home, P.O. Box 2652, Florence, Alabama 35630. Thank you so much for your kind attention.